Michelle Carter stepped out of her black sedan, the cool Chicago wind brushing against her face as she took in the sight of the Grand Horizon Hotel. It was one of her proudest achievements, a towering symbol of luxury that stood out even among the city's most famous landmarks. The building gleamed under the soft glow of streetlights, its windows reflecting the dark sky above. Michelle adjusted her navy blue suit jacket, feeling a sense of pride swell within her chest. This wasn't just any hotel. It was hers. Every brick, every chandelier, every detail had been carefully chosen to reflect her vision of elegance and excellence. But tonight, something felt off. As she walked toward the entrance, the automatic glass doors slid open with a soft whoosh. Inside, the lobby sparkled with polished marble floors and golden accents. A large crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling, casting warm light over the space. Guests milled about, some chatting quietly near the lounge area, others checking in at the front desk. Everything seemed normal, yet Michelle couldn't shake the uneasy feeling growing in the pit of her stomach. She approached the reception desk, where a young white man with neatly combed hair greeted her with a polite smile. "Good evening," he said, his tone crisp and professional. "How may I assist you?" "I'd like to check in," Michelle replied smoothly, placing her ID and credit card on the counter. Her voice carried authority, the kind that came naturally after years of running a multi-million-dollar company. The clerk glanced at her ID, then back at her face. For a moment, there was silence. Then, without missing a beat, he slid the card back toward her. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't see your reservation in our system." Michelle blinked, caught off guard. "That's impossible. I own this hotel. My name is Michelle Carter." The clerk hesitated, his smile faltering slightly. He looked down at his computer screen again, tapping a few keys before shaking his head. "There's no record of a reservation under your name, Ms. Carter. Perhaps you made it through another platform?" "No," Michelle said firmly, leaning closer to the desk. "I didn't make a reservation because I own this property. You can verify that with your manager if needed." At this point, a middle-aged white man appeared behind the clerk. He wore an expensive suit and carried himself with an air of superiority. His name tag read, Kevin, Manager. Without waiting for an invitation, Kevin stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, addressing the clerk rather than Michelle. "This guest claims she owns the hotel," the clerk explained quickly, clearly eager to pass the responsibility on to someone else. Kevin turned to Michelle, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied her. "Ma'am, owning a hotel doesn't automatically grant you access to rooms unless proper arrangements have been made ahead of time. We need to follow protocol." Michelle stared at him, disbelief washing over her features. Was he serious? Did he really think she was lying about being the owner? She took a deep breath, trying to remain composed. "Mr. Kevin, my name is Michelle Carter. I founded this chain of hotels. If you're unsure, feel free to call corporate headquarters. They'll confirm everything." Instead of reaching for the phone, Kevin crossed his arms over his chest. "Look, ma'am, we get people claiming all sorts of things. Until I see official documentation proving your ownership, I'm afraid I can't allow you to proceed." The words hit Michelle like a slap across the face. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, not from embarrassment but from anger. How dare he question her like this? She had built this empire from scratch, worked tirelessly day and night to turn her dreams into reality. And now, standing in her own hotel, she was being treated like an imposter. For a moment, she considered arguing further, demanding answers, or even calling security herself to prove her point. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the way Kevin refused to meet her gaze, or perhaps it was the subtle smirks exchanged between him and the clerk. Whatever it was, Michelle realized that continuing the conversation would only escalate the situation and give them more ammunition to dismiss her. With quiet dignity, Michelle picked up her ID and credit card, slipping them back into her purse. She straightened her posture, meeting Kevin's eyes one last time. "You'll regret this," she said softly, her voice laced with steel. "Mark my words." Without another word, she turned on her heel and walked away. leaving behind the glittering lobby and the men who refused to believe her truth. As she stepped outside into the chilly night air, the weight of what had just happened settled heavily on her shoulders. She had faced discrimination before, subtle comments, skeptical glances, but never anything so blatant, so brazen. Standing by the curb, Michelle pulled out her phone and dialed Lisa Monroe, her assistant. "Lisa," she said when the call connected, "we need to talk. Something happened at the Grand Horizon tonight, and I want you to start gathering information. I think it's time we took a closer look at how things are run around here." Lisa's voice came through the line, sharp and alert. "What happened, Michelle?" "I'll explain later," Michelle replied, glancing back at the hotel. Its bright lights still shone invitingly, masking the ugliness that lurked beneath its surface. "Just trust me. We're going to change everything." And with that, Michelle ended the call, her mind already racing with ideas. This wasn't just about her personal humiliation. It was about exposing a deeper issue that plagued not only her hotel, but the entire industry. She clenched her fists, determination burning in her heart. They thought they could push her aside, ignore her existence, but they had no idea what she was capable of. Not yet. The next morning, Michelle sat at the head of a long conference table in her downtown office. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting soft golden hues over the sleek furniture and polished wood surfaces. Around the table were two people she trusted most: Lisa Monroe, her loyal assistant, and Marcus Hill, a tech-savvy engineer who had helped design security systems for many of Michelle's hotels. Both looked serious as they waited for her to speak. Michelle placed her hands flat on the table, her fingers tapping lightly against the surface. Her mind was still replaying the events of the previous night, the rejection, the disbelief, the smug expressions of Kevin and his clerk. But, instead of letting anger consume her, she channeled it into action. "I want to expose what happened," she began, her voice steady but firm. "Not just what happened to me, but what happens every day in our hotels, to everyone." Lisa nodded, her pen poised over a notepad. "What do you need us to do?" "For starters," Michelle said, leaning forward, "we need proof. Proof that this isn't an isolated incident. I've been thinking about going undercover, visiting other hotels under my brand, documenting how employees treat guests based on race, gender, or appearance." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Undercover? Are you sure about that? It could get messy." "It won't just be me," Michelle replied. "We'll set up cameras, record conversations, gather data. Marcus, I need your help designing discrete recording devices we can use without raising suspicion. And Lisa, I want you to start compiling guest feedback from across all locations. Look for patterns, complaints about discrimination, rude behavior, anything suspicious." Lisa scribbled furiously, nodding along. "Got it, but what about legal risks? If word gets out that we're secretly recording—" "We'll handle that later," Michelle interrupted. "Right now, we focus on gathering evidence. Once we have enough, we'll decide how to present it." Marcus leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "You realize this is bigger than just exposing one hotel manager, right? This could blow up into something much larger, a spotlight on systemic issues within the hospitality industry." "Exactly," Michelle said, her eyes narrowing slightly. "That's why we need to be smart about this. We're not just fighting for me. We're fighting for every person who's ever walked into one of our hotels and felt unwelcome because of who they are." The room fell silent for a moment as everyone absorbed the gravity of what Michelle was proposing. Finally, Lisa spoke up. "Okay, so let's break this down step by step. First, we figure out which hotels to target for your undercover visits. Then Marcus sets up the tech and I dig into the guest feedback archives. Anything else?" Michelle hesitated before answering. "There's one more thing. When the time comes, I want to make this public. Not just internally, but globally. Social media, news outlets, everything. People need to see what's really happening behind closed doors." Lisa glanced at Marcus, then back at Michelle. "Are you sure you're ready for that kind of attention? This could turn ugly fast." "I'm not doing this for attention," Michelle said firmly. "I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. If staying quiet means letting discrimination continue unchecked, then I'd rather face the consequences." Over the next few days, the team sprang into action. Marcus worked tirelessly in his lab, assembling tiny, nearly invisible recording devices that could be hidden in everyday objects like pens, badges, or even brooches. He tested each device rigorously, ensuring they captured clear audio and video, without drawing attention. Meanwhile, Lisa combed through years' worth of guest reviews, interviews, and complaints, looking for any mention of discriminatory treatment. What she found shocked her. "Listen to this," Lisa said one afternoon, holding up a printout of a review. Michelle and Marcus gathered around as she read aloud. "I booked a suite for my family reunion, but when we arrived, the staff acted like we didn't belong there. They kept asking if we could afford the room even though we'd paid in full weeks earlier." Lisa paused, shaking her head. This wasn't an isolated case. There are dozens of similar stories scattered throughout the archives. Michelle clenched her jaw. "Keep digging. Find as many examples as you can. We'll need them when we go public." As Lisa returned to her research, Michelle turned her attention to planning her undercover visits. She selected 5 hotels across different cities, each representing a unique demographic mix. The goal was simple: observe firsthand how employees interacted with guests of varying backgrounds and document any signs of bias. Before leaving for her first trip, Michelle met privately with Marcus to review the equipment. He handed her a small, pin microphone disguised as a lapel accessory. "Just clip this to your jacket," he instructed. "It'll pick up everything within a 10-foot radius. And here," he handed her a slim pen, "is a backup camera. Point it wherever you need to capture footage." Michelle nodded, slipping the items into her bag. "Thanks, Marcus, I owe you one." "You owe me nothing," he replied with a grin. "Just make sure you don't get caught." Michelle's first stop was the Ocean View Resort in Miami, a sprawling beachfront property known for its lavish amenities and celebrity clientele. Dressed casually in jeans and a blouse, Michelle checked in under a fake name, careful to avoid drawing attention to herself. As she wandered the halls and lounged by the pool, she observed interactions between staff and guests. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Employees greeted everyone warmly, offering drinks and towels with practiced smiles. But as the hours passed, subtle differences began to emerge. A white couple checking in received complimentary champagne and a free upgrade to a penthouse suite. Later, a black family arriving with identical reservations was told their room wasn't ready and directed to wait in the lobby. Michelle activated her recording devices, capturing every detail. She approached the front desk herself, pretending to ask about available upgrades. Sure enough, the receptionist smiled politely but informed her that no upgrades were currently available. Yet moments later, Michelle watched as another white guest was offered a discounted rate for a premium suite. By the end of the day, Michelle's bag was filled with damning evidence. Exhausted but determined, she returned to her room and reviewed the footage. Each clip reinforced what she already suspected. The issue wasn't limited to one hotel or one employee. It was systemic, ingrained in the very fabric of the hospitality industry. Back in Chicago, Michelle shared her findings with Lisa and Marcus. Together, they pieced together a timeline of discriminatory practices spanning multiple hotels and countless guests. The weight of the evidence was overwhelming, but so was the potential impact of exposing it. "We're onto something big," Marcus said, scrolling through the files on his laptop. "But once we release this, there's no turning back." "You ready for that?" Michelle stared out the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. "I've never been more ready," she replied softly. "Let's change the game." Michelle's undercover investigation took her to 5 different hotels over the course of 2 weeks. Each location offered its own unique glimpse into the subtle and not-so-subtle biases that plagued the hospitality industry. While some incidents were blatant, others were harder to pinpoint, hidden behind polite smiles and carefully chosen words. But no matter how they were disguised, the patterns were undeniable. Her second stop was the Mountain Ridge Lodge, nestled in the scenic hills of Colorado. Unlike the Ocean View Resort, this hotel catered to a more laid-back crowd, attracting families on vacation and couples seeking a romantic getaway. Michelle checked in under another fake name, choosing a standard room to blend in with the average guest. As she explored the property, she kept her recording devices close, ready to capture anything suspicious. On her first day, Michelle witnessed an interaction that made her blood boil. A wealthy white couple and their young child arrived at the Yasi check-in counter. The receptionist greeted them enthusiastically, offering a warm smile and complimentary chocolates for the little girl. "Welcome to Mountain Ridge," the receptionist said cheerfully. "We've upgraded you to a suite with a mountain view. Enjoy your stay." Moments later, a black family approached the same counter. They were dressed just as nicely as the previous guests, but the receptionist's demeanor shifted instantly. Her smile became forced, her tone clipped. "I'm sorry, but your room isn't ready yet," she said without making eye contact. "You'll need to wait in the lounge area until we can prepare it." Michelle activated her lapel microphone, capturing the entire exchange. She watched as the black family exchanged frustrated glances before reluctantly heading to the lounge. Meanwhile, the white couple strolled past them, keys in hand, laughing about their upgrade. The unfairness of it all hit Michelle like a punch to the gut. How could anyone justify treating people so differently based solely on the color of their skin? The next hotel on Michelle's list was the Lakeside Inn, a charming boutique property located in upstate New York. This time, Michelle decided to focus on gender bias rather than race. She observed how female guests were treated compared to their male counterparts, especially when it came to booking rooms or requesting services. One afternoon, Michelle sat in the hotel's cozy library lounge, sipping tea while eavesdropping on nearby conversations. A middle-aged businessman approached the concierge desk asking for recommendations on local restaurants. The concierge responded promptly, pulling out brochures and jotting down notes. When a young woman asked the same question minutes later, however, the concierge simply shrugged and said, "You can find info online." Michelle frowned, jotting down notes on her phone. These small acts of dismissal might seem insignificant on their own, but together they painted a troubling picture of inequality. It wasn't just about race. It was about power dynamics, privilege, and who society deemed worthy of respect. By the time Michelle reached her fourth destination, the Skyline Tower in Los Angeles, she had grown accustomed to spotting discriminatory behavior almost immediately. The hotel was a high-rise masterpiece catering to celebrities, executives, and tourists alike. Its reputation for luxury attracted a diverse clientele, making it the perfect place to test whether discrimination varied depending on socioeconomic status. Michelle spent hours in the lobby, watching as guests checked in and interacted with staff. One incident stood out above the rest. A Latina woman wearing designer clothes and carrying expensive luggage approached the front desk. Despite her obvious wealth, the receptionist treated her with thinly veiled suspicion. "Can you confirm payment for your reservation?" the receptionist asked, her tone dripping with doubt. The woman nodded calmly and handed over her credit card. But instead of processing the transaction quickly, the receptionist held on to the card for several minutes, double-checking the details multiple times. Meanwhile, a white man standing behind her breezed through the process, receiving his key card within seconds. Michelle couldn't help but notice the tension in the woman's posture as she waited. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the receptionist handed back the credit card and issued the key card with a curt nod. The woman walked away without saying a word, but Michelle saw the hurt flicker across her face. Her final stop was the Sunset Bay Hotel in San Diego, a sprawling resort known for its stunning ocean views and world-class amenities. Here, Michelle focused on observing interactions involving elderly guests and individuals with disabilities. What she found disturbed her deeply. An older Asian couple using walkers struggled to navigate the crowded lobby. Despite their clear need for assistance, none of the staff members offered to help. Instead, they hovered around younger, fitter guests, eager to assist with bags or provide directions. When the couple finally reached the front desk, the receptionist barely acknowledged them, rushing through the check-in process as if trying to get rid of them as quickly as possible. Later that evening, Michelle attended a dinner event hosted by the hotel. She noticed a blind man sitting alone at a corner table, his guide dog lying quietly at his feet. Waiters passed him repeatedly without taking his order, focusing instead on larger groups or more visible patrons. After nearly 20 minutes, Michelle decided to intervene. Approaching the table, she introduced herself and politely asked if he needed any help. The man smiled gratefully, explaining that he had been waiting for someone to notice him. Michelle returned to her seat, seething with anger. How could a hotel claim to offer luxury when it failed to treat all its guests with basic human decency? The hypocrisy of it all sickened her. Back in Chicago, Michelle gathered Lisa and Marcus once again to review her findings. Together, they compiled hours of footage and dozens of documented incidents, each one more infuriating than the last. Lisa summarized the data, highlighting recurring themes: racial profiling, gender bias, ageism, and ableism. Marcus uploaded the recordings to a secure server, ensuring they would be safe until the team decided how to use them. As they worked late into the night, Michelle felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, determination. These weren't just statistics or case studies. They represented real people who had been humiliated, dismissed, and dehumanized, and now, thanks to her efforts, their voices would finally be heard. "This is going to change everything," Lisa said softly, breaking the silence. "When we release this, there's no way they'll be able to ignore it." Michelle nodded, staring at the glowing screen in front of her. "Good," she replied, "because it's long overdue." The day had finally come. Michelle Carter stood at the head of the conference table in the Grand Horizon Hotel's executive boardroom, her presence commanding attention. Around the table sat the hotel chain's top executives, men and women, who had built their careers on profit margins and polished reputations. Today, however, they weren't discussing quarterly earnings or marketing strategies. They were here to face the truth. Michelle took a deep breath before speaking. Her voice was calm but firm, cutting through the murmurs of nervous chatter. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "I've called this emergency meeting because we have a serious issue, one that goes beyond numbers or spreadsheets. It's about how we treat our guests, and more importantly, how some of them are being treated unfairly." She paused, letting her words sink in. Then, without waiting for a response, she pressed play on the laptop in front of her. The large screen behind her flickered to life, showing footage from her undercover investigation. First came the Ocean View Resort in Miami, the white couple receiving champagne and an upgrade, followed by the black family being told their room wasn't ready. Next was the Mountain Ridge Lodge in Colorado, where a black family waited patiently, while a white couple walked away with keys to a free suite. Each clip painted a vivid picture of inequality. As the videos played, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Some executives fidgeted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding eye contact. Others whispered to one another, trying to downplay what they were seeing. One man, Richard, leaned back in his chair with a dismissive smirk. "This is just anecdotal evidence," he muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "You can't draw conclusions from a few isolated incidents." Michelle turned to him, her expression unflinching. "Isolated? These aren't isolated incidents, Richard. This is systemic. Every hotel I visited showed similar patterns of discrimination. And don't think for a second that these are the only examples." She gestured toward Lisa, who handed out printed reports detailing dozens of guest complaints and reviews dating back years. "We've analyzed feedback from across the entire chain. The data doesn't lie." The room fell silent as the executives flipped through the pages. Graphs and charts illustrated clear disparities in treatment based on race, gender, age, and socioeconomic status. For every glowing review praising the staff's professionalism, there were multiple accounts of guests feeling ignored, belittled, or outright mistreated. One executive, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, cleared her throat nervously. "Even if this is true, and I'm not saying it isn't, we have to consider the cost of addressing it. Implementing diversity training programs, revising hiring practices, installing anonymous feedback systems, all of that takes time and money. Shareholders won't approve such drastic changes unless we show a direct return on investment." Michelle crossed her arms, her patience wearing thin. "So what you're saying is that equality isn't worth The expense? That we should prioritize profits over people? She stepped closer to the table, her eyes scanning the faces of those seated before her. Let me remind you why we're in this business. We're here to provide comfort, luxury, and exceptional service to our guests. But how can we claim to deliver that when half of them feel unwelcome or disrespected? Patricia opened her mouth to respond, but Michelle cut her off. And let's talk about shareholders. Do you really think they'll support us if this gets leaked to the public? Because trust me, it will. Social media moves faster than any PR team. Once people see the reality of what's happening in our hotels, we'll lose far more than money. We'll lose credibility. Our brand will be tarnished forever. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Even Richard, who had earlier dismissed her findings, seemed to deflate slightly under her gaze. Sensing a crack in their resistance, Michelle pressed on. I'm proposing a plan to fix this, not just for optics, but because it's the right thing to do. Mandatory diversity training for all employees, starting with management. Anonymous feedback systems so guests can report issues without fear of retaliation. And most importantly, promoting qualified minorities into leadership roles to ensure representation at every level. She paused, allowing her suggestions to settle. Then, with a small smile, she revealed her secret weapon. To make this happen, I've established the Horizon Equality Fund. Financed entirely from my personal wealth, it will incentivize hotels to meet equity benchmarks through bonuses and grants. If we work together, we can create real change. But if anyone refuses to cooperate, her voice hardened, I'll sell off my shares and dismantle this company piece by piece. The room erupted into chaos. Executives shouted over one another, some arguing against the proposal, others cautiously supporting it. Through the noise, Michelle remained composed, watching as the tide slowly turned in her favor. One by one, the skeptics began to falter, realizing they had no choice but to listen. Finally, Patricia raised her hand, signaling for silence. When the room quieted, she spoke carefully. Michelle, your passion is commendable, and the evidence is undeniable. I propose we form a task force to implement your recommendations immediately. Let's start with pilot programs at select locations and expand from there. Michelle nodded, satisfied but not yet victorious. Agreed. But I expect full transparency and accountability throughout the process. No shortcuts, no excuses. With that, the meeting adjourned. As the executives filed out of the room, many avoided meeting Michelle's eyes. She stayed behind, leaning against the table as exhaustion washed over her. Lisa approached cautiously, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. That was incredible, she said softly. You handled them perfectly. Michelle managed a tired smile. It's not over yet. Changing minds is one thing. Changing hearts is another. Later that evening, Michelle found herself alone in her office, staring out at the Chicago skyline. The city lights twinkled like stars, a reminder of the countless lives touched by her hotels. She thought about the guests whose stories she had uncovered, the families turned away, the elderly ignored, the disabled left stranded. Their voices echoed in her mind, fueling her determination to keep fighting. Her phone buzzed on the desk, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Marcus calling to check in. How did it go? He asked. They agreed to try, Michelle replied, her tone measured. But this is just the beginning. We need to stay vigilant. Marcus chuckled. You're unstoppable, you know that? Michelle smiled faintly. Not unstoppable, just unwilling to give up. As she ended the call, she glanced at the stack of papers on her desk, the reports, the footage, the plans for reform. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Change was coming, whether the world was ready for it or not. The board meeting had been tense, but Michelle knew that real change wouldn't come from closed-door discussions alone. It needed to be public, visible, undeniable, and impossible to ignore. That's why she decided to hold a live-streamed town hall, inviting not just employees and executives but also guests, journalists, and anyone else who cared about fairness in the hospitality industry. This wasn't just about exposing what had happened. It was about sparking a movement. Michelle sat in her home office late one evening preparing for the event. Her laptop screen glowed softly as she rehearsed her speech, making sure every word carried weight. Lisa sat across from her, offering last-minute advice. "Remember," Lisa said gently, "this isn't just about you anymore. It's about everyone who's ever felt unwelcome because of their race, gender, or background." Michelle nodded, taking a deep breath. "I know. And I want them to see themselves in my story, to know they're not alone." The next day, Michelle logged onto the live stream platform from her office. The camera framed her perfectly with the hashtag #BlackCEOExposed displayed prominently on the screen behind her. As the broadcast went live, thousands of viewers tuned in, their comments flooding the chat window almost instantly. Some offered words of encouragement, while others shared their own experiences of discrimination in hotels and other public spaces. "Good evening," Michelle began, her voice steady and clear. "Thank you all for joining me today. My name is Michelle Carter, and I am the founder and CEO of the Grand Horizon hotel chain. Many of you may have heard about an incident where I was refused entry at one of my own hotels. While that moment was painful, it opened my eyes to something much bigger, a problem that affects countless people every single day." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "What happened to me wasn't unique. It was part of a pattern, a systemic issue that exists not just in my hotels but across the entire hospitality industry. People are treated differently based on the color of their skin, their gender, their age, or even how much money they appear to have. These biases aren't always obvious, but they're there, hidden beneath smiles and polite phrases." To illustrate her point, Michelle played clips from her undercover investigation. Viewers watched as white guests received warm welcomes and free upgrades, while minority guests were ignored or questioned about their ability to pay. The contrast was stark, leaving many commenters in the chat visibly shaken. "This is exactly what I went through," one viewer wrote. "They acted like I didn't belong there." Another added, "Thank you for speaking up. No one believes us when we say these things happen." When the footage ended, Michelle turned back to the camera, her expression softening. "These aren't just videos. They're real stories of real people. Families celebrating milestones, couples enjoying vacations, individuals seeking refuge after long days of travel. All of them deserved respect, yet many left feeling humiliated and unseen." Her voice grew stronger as she shifted to solutions. "We can't undo the past, but we can build a better future. Starting today, the Grand Horizon hotel chain will implement mandatory diversity training for all employees. We're installing anonymous feedback systems so guests can report issues without fear of retaliation. And most importantly, we're committing to promoting qualified minorities into leadership roles, ensuring representation at every level." The chat exploded with positive reactions. "Yes," one commenter wrote, "accountability is key." Another added, "Finally, someone is doing something about this." But Michelle wasn't done yet. She leaned closer to the camera, her tone turning personal. "Let me tell you why this matters to me. Growing up, I faced discrimination constantly. Teachers doubted my abilities. Employers overlooked my qualifications. Friends whispered behind my back, wondering if I truly belonged. But I refused to let those voices define me. I worked harder, pushed farther, and eventually built a company that reflects my values, or so I thought." Her voice wavered slightly as she continued. "When I stood outside that hotel, rejected by my own staff, I felt like I was back at square one, like nothing I'd achieved mattered because of how I looked. But instead of letting it break me, I chose to fight. Because if I could feel that way as the CEO, imagine how it feels for someone without power or privilege." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away, refusing to let emotion overshadow her message. "This isn't just about me. It's about creating a world where no one has to prove their worth to be treated with dignity. Where a family can walk into a hotel and feel welcomed, regardless of their race or background. where a young girl, dreaming of becoming a leader, knows she'll be judged by her actions, not her appearance. As Michelle wrapped up her speech, she encouraged viewers to share their own stories using the hashtag #BlackCEOExposed. "Your voices matter," she said. "Together, we can hold industries accountable and demand equality for everyone." When the live stream ended, the response was overwhelming. Journalists praised Michelle's courage, calling her a trailblazer for justice. Social media buzzed with conversations about discrimination in luxury spaces, with countless users sharing their own experiences. Critics tried to discredit her efforts, accusing her of seeking publicity, but their arguments fell flat against the tide of support. That night, Michelle scrolled through the comments, reading heartfelt messages from strangers around the world. One stood out. "You've given us hope. Thank you for standing up when no one else would." She smiled, feeling a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Lisa walked into the room carrying 2 cups of tea. "How are you holding up?" she asked, placing 1 cup beside Michelle. "I'm okay," Michelle replied, leaning back in her chair. "More than okay, actually. For the first time, I feel like we're making progress, not just for our hotels, but for everyone." Lisa nodded, handing her the tea. "You've started something big, Michelle. Something that's going to change lives." Michelle took a sip, gazing at the glowing screen one last time before shutting it off. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But tonight, she allowed herself to rest, knowing she had ignited a spark that couldn't be extinguished. Months passed since Michelle Carter's live-streamed town hall, and the impact of her actions rippled far beyond what anyone could have imagined. The Grand Horizon hotel chain became a beacon of reform in the hospitality industry, with its new policies setting an example for others to follow. But the transformation didn't happen overnight. It took relentless effort, unwavering determination, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. At first, there was resistance. Some employees pushed back against the mandatory diversity training, claiming it was unnecessary or inconvenient. A few managers grumbled about the anonymous feedback system, arguing that it would lead to frivolous complaints. Even within the executive board, whispers of doubt lingered, questioning whether these changes were worth the cost. But Michelle refused to back down. She held weekly meetings with department heads, ensuring that every initiative was implemented correctly. Lisa Monroe worked tirelessly behind the scenes, organizing workshops and gathering data to measure progress. Marcus Hill upgraded the hotel's security systems to include bias monitoring software, which flagged suspicious behavior during guest interactions. Slowly but surely, the culture began to shift. One of the most significant changes came when Elena Rodriguez was promoted to manager of the Grand Horizon Hotel, the very location where Michelle had been refused entry months earlier. Elena, a young Latina woman who had started as a front desk clerk, had always shown exceptional dedication and fairness in her work. When Kevin, the former manager, was demoted following an internal investigation into his misconduct, Michelle saw an opportunity to promote someone who truly embodied the values she wanted her company to represent. Elena wasted no time making her mark. On her first day as manager, she gathered the staff for a meeting. "This hotel is more than just a building," she told them. "It's a place where people come to celebrate, to connect, to feel safe. Our job is to make sure every single guest leaves happier than when they arrived." Under her leadership, the hotel adopted a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior, and employees were encouraged to speak up if they witnessed anything unfair. The results spoke for themselves. Guest satisfaction ratings soared, with many praising the warm and inclusive atmosphere. One review stood out. "I've stayed at dozens of hotels, but this was the first time I felt truly welcome. Thank you for seeing me as a person, not a stereotype." It was moments like these that reminded Michelle why she had fought so hard. As the months went by, the Maser & Black CEO Exposed campaign continued to gain momentum. Social media users shared stories of discrimination in various industries, sparking conversations about systemic inequality worldwide. Journalists wrote articles highlighting Michelle's efforts, calling her a pioneer for accountability and transparency. Awards poured in, recognizing her contributions to social justice and corporate responsibility. Yet through it all, Michelle remained humble, focusing on the bigger picture rather than personal accolades. One evening, Michelle found herself standing on the rooftop of the Grand Horizon Hotel, gazing out at the Chicago skyline. The sun had set, leaving the city bathed in soft hues of orange and purple. Behind her, the hotel's neon sign, "Equality Starts Here," glowed brightly, a testament to the journey she and her team had undertaken. Lisa joined her, carrying a clipboard filled with updates. "We're ahead of schedule," she said, smiling. "The diversity training programs are showing real improvement, and guest feedback has never been better." Michelle nodded, her eyes still fixed on the horizon. "It's a start," she replied, softly. "But we can't stop here. There's still so much work to be done." Lisa placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've already changed everything, Michelle. You turned pain into purpose. That's something no one can take away from you." Michelle turned to look at her friend, gratitude shining in her eyes. "This wasn't just my fight," she said. "It was ours. Without you, Marcus, Elena, and everyone else who stood by me, none of this would have been possible." They stood in silence for a moment, taking in the beauty of the city below. Finally, Michelle spoke again, her voice filled with resolve. "Remember when I said this isn't just about me? I meant it. This is about creating a legacy, a world where everyone feels valued, respected, and seen. If we can do that, then all of this will have been worth it." Lisa smiled, nodding in agreement. "You've already inspired so many people, Michelle. Imagine what's next." With that, they headed back inside, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The road to equality was long, but Michelle knew they were moving in the right direction. As she walked through the hotel's gleaming halls, she couldn't help but feel proud, not just of what they had accomplished, but of the future they were building together. Later that night, as Michelle sat in her office reviewing reports, she paused to reflect on how far they had come. What had started as a humiliating experience outside her own hotel had transformed into a movement for justice and accountability. The pain of rejection had given way to purpose, and the anger she once felt had fueled meaningful change. Her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Just saw the latest guest feedback. Looks like we're doing something right." Michelle chuckled, typing a quick reply. "Couldn't have done it without you." As she powered down her laptop and prepared to leave for the evening, Michelle glanced at the framed quote hanging on her wall. "Change begins when we choose to act." She smiled, knowing she had lived those words to the fullest. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, reminding her of the countless lives touched by her efforts. Michelle stepped into the elevator, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But tonight she allowed herself to rest, knowing she had ignited a spark that would continue to shine brightly for generations to come.